Today we're going to draw several parts of the face. We're going to draw the eye and the ear as seen from the front. So you are going to need a piece of paper, a pencil, and an eraser. So we're going to start by folding our paper in half, matching up the corners carefully, and folding it in half one more time. Next time we will draw two more parts of the face. The first thing we're going to do is turn our paper over, and this is going to be the back. Let's put our information. So let's put our name, art class, art period, and date. And these are our face parts. Now, we are also going to add some shading today. So, we are going to fold our paper. Our information is on the back. Let's fold it inside out. And we are going to start with the eye. Okay? So, I'm going to fold my paper so just the part that I'm working with is going to show. First, when we drew our portrait face map last week, we had our eye line. So let's draw a horizontal line across the page. And we're going to mark 2 marks on the side. This is representing one of those 5 eye spaces on our portrait. When we started the face map last week, remember our next step was to draw the eye socket. And so I'm going to draw a circle shape that takes up most of the space. And I want that to be in the center. So I notice I have a little more space here, so I'm going to bump this out just a little bit. Okay, so now I have my eye space, I have my eye socket, and my first step is going to be to draw the eyelid. The upper eyelid, remember, starts below the halfway line and comes up across so it makes an arc. Okay. Our second line, remember, we talked about how the lower eyelid has a different shape. Okay. So it starts here and it comes down a little bit and comes up. Now I am using pencil, but I want this to show up since we're going to shade, so I'm using a little bit darker pencil here to go over this line. Okay, and the next part that I want you to do is we're going to erase where our eye socket was there. And now we're going to draw the iris, the colored part of the eye. So if we are looking straight ahead, the iris, the colored part of our eye, is going to touch or barely touch the bottom of the eyelid. And the top part is going to go underneath the eyelid. Okay, so that will be our next step. And now I'm going to take out this line because since we're adding shading, we don't want that line in there. Okay, now, when last week we marked our pupil with a dot. Today, we're going to do it a little differently. So remember that our eye is not flat and it is wet. So we have to think about the highlights and we have to think about the pupil placement. So for right now, I want you to put a lowercase c in towards the center of the eye, and that's going to become our pupil. Okay, for right now, that's all we're going to do. All right, now when our eye is wet and round, it's going to have highlight shapes. If you look in the mirror, everybody's highlight shapes are going to be a little bit different, but for now, I want you to draw 2 or 3 shapes similar to this. When we look at a person's eye, or if you look in the mirror at your own eye, some people you can actually see slices of color coming out from the center, sort of like a bicycle spoke. So that's how we're going to start, and I'm going to skip where the highlight is. Or the other approach that I can take is that I can shade the iris like I would a sphere, so it becomes like a ball. Okay?
Bicycle.
So we're going to start, and now that we have that started, now we'll come back and fill in. And I can use the tip of the pencil, I can use the side of the pencil, but I am working my way around the sphere, and I'm skipping where my highlight spaces are. If I go over them, I will need to come back and use my eraser because they do have to be there. Our eye is not flat and it is wet. Okay, now, when we were thinking about spheres and shapes way back at the beginning of the semester, it had a different kind of shadow. So some people actually have an edge or an outline of dark pigment. That's the part of the eye that has a color. That's called pigment around the edge of the eye. Okay, so if you'd like to darken up this edge, you can do that. And then I have to think about the value. So I'm continuing to build the value with my eye. And then when we had spheres, or we're drawing our spheres, our edges were a little bit darker. So now you'll notice I'm not going like the spokes of the wheel. I'm shading the edge like I would shade this sphere. And I'm not using heavy pressure. So now I'm trying to build up the form, still paying attention to where my highlights are, and I'm not covering up my initial marks. I'm just sort of adding this three-dimensional quality. And just like on our first assignment, we didn't want an outline and a sudden change of value. We wanted it to gradually fade from the outside in. So I'm going to try to blend that value in so I don't just have an outline. Okay, now on the eye, on the pupil, we're going to do something a little bit different. So here is the C that we drew with our pupil, and we're going to come back and make it kind of a scribbly line. Don't close up the circle. Okay, so I'm going to come back and we're going to leave it open in the middle. If I decide that that's too light, then I can bring a very light value across. Okay? Before we talk about how to shade the eyelid and how to draw the eyelid, we need to put in our tear duct, which is right here in the corner. And on your eye, this is the light pink part, so let's give that a little bit of value. Because our eye socket is round, our eye has a pocket. For those of you that stay up too late at night, or if you got socked in the eye, if you're sick, you see this pocket more readily. So we're going to come about halfway across with the pencil, and I'm going to leave this open. So I'm trying to create the illusion that the eye is three-dimensional. And that includes this pocket or bag under the eye. And as I move towards the bottom of the pocket, the fingers will be a little bit longer. And it's important when I'm adding these lines that I think about the shape, what's happening with the shape. If I get too many lines, then I can come back and erase them out. But I want to create this pocket underneath the eye. Also, our bottom eyelid is thick. So if you look in the mirror, you might also see there's a little edge of skin that we can actually see the skin is thick. So you might want to draw that as well. And then I need to take this out a little bit here. Okay. All right, now the upper eyelid's going to be a little different. It also, we're going to use that socket shape. And so for the upper eyelid, the shadow is mostly above the eye and between the eye and the eyebrow. So we're going to shadow that first because that's going to be darker. And on the eyelid, the shadow is going to be lighter. And again, mostly on the side, on the left, and we want those fingers to come forward. Let's take out this extra line here. So the shadow on the eye, the upper eyelid is slightly shadowed on the outside of the lid, the left side and the right side, and it's lighter in the middle. Remember last week we felt our eye and we could feel it bulging out. Now I've kind of exaggerated the shadows here above the eye, or between the eye and the eyebrow, to make the eye stand out. Okay, so that's how we have our eye. All right. We do not see any tear duct or anything at the other end of the eye. So there we go. There's our eye. We are not drawing eyelashes. Please leave those off. Okay? They will be too cumbersome and too hard to draw to be effective. Okay? So that is our eye. You do not need to label the drawing. So the ear is turned a different way. So here is our eye that we drew. But now we're going to be drawing on the same side of the paper, but I have to orient my eye a different, or my paper a different direction because the ear is tall. Okay, and we are drawing a side view of the ear. So our first step, we talked about this last week when we were doing our face map, is it's like a C, and you'll notice that it is on a slant. Okay, so think about this capital C shape, and it is on a slant. Okay, next, our ear has a shell. Remember, our ear is designed to catch sound, so this next shape is also like a C. And it does not come down as low because it becomes the earlobe. Okay, and you can feel your earlobe. And then we have the part where our ear canal is, and that's the part that actually goes into our head. So it is also kind of C-like in the shape. All right. The other part that we talked about last week is the part that's in the middle of our ear that acts as the backstop that catches the sound. And that is this little bump right here in the center. Remember last week we talked about how some people's is shaped like this and some people's is shaped like this. Okay, so go ahead and draw that. And once we have our map done, the rest of the drawing is created by adding shadow. So if I look at my drawing, I notice I have a few more parts here. So that's kind of in here. This is going to be the beginning of this shadow. So you'll notice it's sort of C-like in shape. And that shadow is going to come all the way into this space. So let's fill that with a medium light value. Medium light value. Not a lot of pressure on the pencil. Okay, so now that I've done that, I'm going to come back and check the drawing, and look, this shadow comes further down to my backstop. So I need to extend this on down to the backstop. So the ear is made up of a series of rows or edges, shapes, and then we're going to create some shadow in here. And then this is the part of our ear that's going into our ear canal. So let's make that just a little bit darker value. And let's not lose our C-like shape. Okay? All right. Now, if I come back here, I'll notice that there are some areas of this shadow that are darker. So I'm going to go ahead and darken that. And I want to move my hand a little bit so I can see that a little better. And I'm looking for the value changes. So this is darker, and it's especially dark over here at the edge. And we'll come back and add a little more shadow into the earlobe a little later. Okay? All right, now let's take a look at the outside shell. This is also not flat. So I want to think about how the light is going around that shape. It's like a tube. And so because it's like a tube, my marks cannot be flat. My shadows cannot be flat. and the shadow changes. Once I get up here to the top, you'll notice now the shadow is on the outside edge. So now I'm going to switch to the outside edge of the earlobe. And I'm working to create the illusion. I can shade up into the ear a little bit. I'm working back, it's going to sort of fade out. And then here it's going to come back to the inside edge. So I'm curving my marks. And I'm thinking about how the value is going around the shape of the ear, the shell of the ear there. Okay, and so I should start to see that illusion. Now, I have some transitions that aren't quite working yet, so then I need to come back and create my medium values. I'm trying to get the shadows to blend and to show the structure of the ear. If my highlight is too much, too large, I can add a little medium value. And so on and so forth until I create. That's pretty good. Now let's look at the bottom. It's still, this is where our ear is hooking onto our face, but we need a little more value range in here, a little more variety. Okay, and so we're building that, and this looks a little too much. Okay, so we'll go back and forth until we have completed or can see the structure of the ear. Remember that occasionally you have to pick up your drawing and look at it from a distance. That will help you see what's too light, what's too dark, where the form is not working. And if it still looks flat, then maybe we need to put a little bit of shadow here on the edge. Just right on the edge. We're trying to remember to get it to look three-dimensional. Maybe this is too much shadow there. Okay, all right. So let's compare what we drew to our drawing. Oh, there's quite a bit more shadow here. So the ear is attaching to our face here, to our head. And then the light is at the top. And then if I look at the drawing, I notice there's more shadow here on the edge. Okay, so there we have our ear. For next time, before next time, I want you to draw your eye and shade the eye. Remember, we are starting with our horizontal line in the center. Step 1, drawing our eye socket. Step 2, then drawing the upper lid and the lower lid. And finally, we put in the iris, the colored part of the eye. Before we add any value to the center of the eye or the pupil, it's important to draw the highlight areas, which will stay unshaded or white. If we get too much shading, we'll have to go back and create those highlight spots by using an eraser. When we're shading the upper lid and the lower lid, we want to think about creating the pocket so the shadow goes around the edges. When we're shading the iris, the colored part of the eye, we want to think about shading a sphere or shading out like from the center, like the spokes of a bicycle wheel to start with. But you'll notice that I can still see some of the color spokes, but it is smooth and it tends to be darker at the edges, so it looks more like a sphere or a ball. I can use smoother strokes if I want by using the side of the pencil. When we draw the ear, it's important to make sure that your paper is vertical. The ear is tall, so our paper needs to be vertical. That's number one. You have in your papers an example of an eye and an example of an ear, so if you would like to print those out, you can have those printed out, or you can look at the screen. But we draw the outside shape of the ear first. It is like a capital letter C, but it is on a slant. You'll notice here it's very slanted. So I'm starting with the outside contour shape first. The next thing is I want to put in the shape of the backstop. It's either going to be like this or like this. And then I'm going to establish some of the shapes of the inner ear. So quite simply, we have our outside of our ear. We have a series of shapes. So the outside of the ear, the inside of the ear, and then our ear canal. And then we come back and make those more three-dimensional. They have high and lows, and we build up the shadow until we have a range of value and our ear starts to look three-dimensional by how we've applied the shadows. And so that's what I want you to have for before next time. Next time we will work on the lips and the nose.